Angela Marjorie Wrightson was born in 1974 or 1975 in Darlington in the UK. Not much is known about her earlier life, but plenty is known about her later years. Angie had been born to a family of 8 children. However, their home life had been poor and full of neglect and abuse, and so they had been taken into the foster care system. Throughout her life, Angie had remained estranged from her siblings. I believe that had she kept in contact with them, her life may have turned out differently, as she would have had the guidance and company of her siblings to help her through. In 2011, she had moved to Hartlepool, which is a large port town in County Durham in the northeast of England, and here she was known locally as Angie. It was a known fact within the community that Angie was a vulnerable adult, meaning that she had a very naive personality and would be unable to protect herself against significant harm or exploitation. In late 2014, Angie was 39 years old. She was unemployed and living alone in a small house on Stephen Street in Hartlepool. Hartlepool is the second most dangerous major town in Durham, and in 2020 alone, there was 120 crimes per 1,000 people. Stephen Street, where Angie moved to, is a run-down road where a significant number of houses are boarded up, and more than a quarter of occupied households are categorised as economically inactive, meaning that residents are neither in work nor seeking employment, and basically living off benefits given to them by the government. It was a common sight in the area for men and women to be seen clutching cans of strong lager and cider gathered in grimy doorways and the nearby park and graveyard. Angie had been known at one point to have a boyfriend. However, he lived a very similar lifestyle to Angie and had died young of an alcohol-related illness. She was a colourful character, infamous in the community for being an alcoholic, which seen her earn the unflattering nickname of Alco Ange. She would consume at least 9 litres of strong cider every day, and would often be found lying passed out in the middle of the road. Angie didn't have any friends and didn't keep in touch with her remaining family members. She was said to have kept a very lonely life. Angie's neighbours would complain frequently to the police about her loud and aggressive attitude, which often led to her having quarrels in the street. The police were definitely familiar with Angie, not just due to the calls by the neighbours, but also due to Angie's habit of hoax phone calls to the ambulance service. Angie's antisocial behaviour had led to 47 criminal convictions, causing her to be in and out of prison on petty charges. She had a number of ASBOs and would often have bruises on her face because of fights that she would get into. She was covered in homemade tattoos, including a cross on her face. She was what people in the community would brand a nuisance to have living amongst them, someone they would try and avoid in the street. It's a profile which often triggers criticism. Angie was a vulnerable woman left to struggle alone, forgotten by authorities and dismissed as an aggressive drunk who had never worked, but this was not the case. She was in regular contact with agencies in Hartlepool and was offered frequent help and support. In 2012, Angie spent around 8 months at a residential facility where she was helped to get sober. She was doing well until she worked out a way to leave and buy more alcohol. In 2013, her care team managed to secure funding for her to go into a rehabilitation retreat near York. Her social worker drove her there and settled her in, but within 24 hours, Angie had taken a taxi back home because she was desperate for a drink. Angie even had a social worker who would visit her often and try and make sure that her money was being spent on food and toiletries rather than alcohol. Her rent was paid by the council directly to the landlord, just so that a roof was kept over her head, because she couldn't be trusted not to spend her rent money on alcohol. It seems that if it came down to it, Angie would more than likely have prioritised her drink rather than her home. But she was described as house-proud, filling her home with china knickknacks and teddy bears from the local second-hand shop. Pictures hung on her walls and her kitchen was neat and tidy, if a little bare. because she sold many of her items for more drink money. It was easy to take advantage of Angela. Her usual behaviour inspired neither friendship nor loyalty. When drunk, she was out of control and unlikable. Once wheeled in a metal bar, she chased a girl down the street. She would call her landlord with fictional problems, saying windows had been broken when in fact they had not. And then she would threaten to break them in herself if her landlord did not do what she wanted. But the darkness and confusion of Angie's life would be punctured by small pinpricks of kindness. She would buy chocolate bars when she was buying cider and put them through the letterbox for the young son of a neighbour, so her heart was in the right place. She also loved animals, which I think is a good indication as to whether somebody is a good person. She once looked after an acquaintance's Alsatian for 3 weeks, which gave her a purpose and actually stemmed her drinking. She was devastated when she had to give the dog back. I think that Angie was just a very lonely person, and all she needed really was one good friend, be it a person or an animal. Angie's neighbour, Siobhan Quinn, said that Angie would sometimes cry and claim that she had no family at all. She would telephone Miss Quinn to say she had no electricity or her microwave was broken. Miss Quinn stated, "Angie craved company. That's why she caused havoc sometimes. That's why she would call me and get me to the house. She was just lonely." Despite her gruff exterior, Angie was known to open her home to down and outs, people in similar situations to her, people who had drink and drug problems, who were lost in life or without guidance, mostly troubled teenagers. Groups of youths started dropping by first thing in the morning so that Angie could buy them cigarettes before they went to school. She would allow underage drinkers to congregate in her living room, where they would use it as a doss house, and on the provision that she could share their drink, she would agree to buy their alcohol from the local shop, where 3-litre bottles of 7.5% cider could be bought for as little as £3. These teens would often steal Angie's money and mobile phones, and she would often have to seek help from neighbours to make the kids scatter when they ignored her pleas to leave. On the morning of December the 8th, 2014, Angie had argued with her landlord, John Meggerson, because he refused to buy her alcohol. She had thrown her keys at him a number of times, and eventually he had left with them. Angie felt defeated that day. She had no money. She desperately wanted more alcohol and didn't have a hope in the world. Angie didn't even have enough money for food anymore, and her weight had dropped to just 6 stone. That evening, 2 girls aged 13 and 14 wandered around Hartlepool, smoking cigarettes, drinking hard cider, and ingesting prescription pills. At some point during the night, the girls had found Angela sitting outside her apartment at 14 Stephen Street. The girls asked Angela if she would go into the shop and buy them some more alcohol, seeing as though they were too young to get it themselves, and Angela, of course, obliged. Angie could be seen on CCTV inside the shop, purchasing the alcohol, whilst the 2 girls remained inside her home. After she had gone into the shop and got them some alcohol, the 3 of them sat drinking together inside Angie's house. It was around 7:30 p.m. at this point. One of the teenagers pulled out her mobile phone at this point and began to take selfies with Angie, more than likely to mock her. Angie, as I mentioned, wouldn't have been able to see that the girls were mocking her and would have just enjoyed the company and believed that the girls just wanted to hang out with her. The girl began posting these selfies onto her Snapchat account for all her friends to see. The names of the 2 young girls is not and has not ever been disclosed. However, they are referred to in the media under the pseudonyms Olivia and Yasmin. A short while after the selfies had been posted to the Snapchat account, the 2 girls, known only as Olivia and Yasmin, suddenly and quite viciously turned on Angie. In the hours that followed, Angie suffered more than 100 injuries. At approximately 9 p.m, one of the girls posted a second photograph to Snapchat in which Angela could be seen with clear facial injuries. During the attack, Yasmin and Olivia used a number of household objects, including a coffee table, a kettle, a shovel, and an 18-inch wooden baton driven with screws to beat and torture Angie. At approximately 11 p.m, two of Angie's friends, Tracy Gascoigne and Melanie Moon, visited the property in anticipation of drinking with Angie. After shouting and banging on her window, they found that her front door was unlocked and the living room in a state of devastation, whilst the two teenagers and Angie hid out of sight in the bathroom. I just want to remind you that Angie was a vulnerable adult, so she would have just done what the girls told her to do, which was to hide. And I'm sure that she was also terrified at this point, and they more than likely would have threatened her if she didn't comply. Melanie Moon shouted to Tracy Gascoigne, "Someone's wrecked Angie's house, you should see the state of it." The reply came back, "I don't care." Angie's friends left, and at some point after this, the girls paused the attack whilst they went to visit a friend. They returned to Stephen Street at approximately 2 a.m. on the 9th of December to continue the attack. The final blow had come when they picked up Angie's television set and smashed it over her head. The teenagers eventually left Angie, either dead or dying, at around 4 a.m, and one of the girls texted her carer to come and collect her. With no response and correctly assuming they would have been reported missing, the girls twice telephoned 999 for a lift home from the police. But when this lift hadn't come quick enough for them, they placed yet another call to emergency services. Just bear in mind, this call had come just minutes after they had battered a woman to death inside her own home. Two girls were in the care of social services, and the country had just tried to sweep it under the mat to cover for the terrible jobs that most social workers do these days. I'm sure there are social workers out there who are amazing at their jobs, but in recent years, the majority just do not seem to be up to the standards that they need to be. How was a 13 and a 14-year-old in the care of social services allowed to wander the streets in the early hours of the morning, drinking, smoking, taking drugs, and murdering people? En route home with the police, the girls once again posed for a Snapchat photograph, this time with the caption, "In the back of the busy van again." Obviously, this wasn't their first time getting a lift home from police, and they were showing off that they were once again in trouble. At approximately 8:45 am on the 9th of December, John Meggerson returned to give Angela her keys back that she had thrown at him the day previous. That is when he found her lifeless and bloodied body. When Mr. Meggerson saw Angela, there was no doubt in his mind that she was dead. She was surrounded by broken furniture, scattered blood-stained implements, and covered in shards of broken glass. She had hundreds of injuries and was naked from the waist down. She had bled out all over the sofa on which she had been placed. It was a brutal end to a troubled life. Following their arrest, the British media uncovered that both Olivia and Yasmin were products of profoundly unhealthy homes. Both families had histories of alcohol abuse and domestic violence. Both girls had spent time in foster care. There, staff reported that Olivia and Yasmin assaulted them, bullied other children, and engaged in sexual intercourse. After the murder, a drawing featuring a woman stabbing a man in the chest with a knife was found in one of the girls' bedrooms. I hate when courts go down this route. There are millions of children out there with awful home lives who witness violence and abuse, but they don't go on to murder people. There is no justifiable excuse. In Angela's case, a member of court staff was said to have saved one of the girls from killing herself during the trial. The compelling medical evidence for her anonymity application showed that she would become suicidal again if she was named, even now that she is an adult. At a hearing in London, their barrister, Edward Fitzgerald, told Mrs. Justice Tipples that both teenagers suffer from recognisable mental conditions, adding that they are extremely psychologically vulnerable. He went on to say that the claimants live in fear that if their names are disclosed, they will be attacked, and that affects their mental health and threatens their rehabilitation, and indeed promotes the risk of self-harm or even suicide. He added it would seriously prejudice both their therapeutic treatment and their rehabilitation, in which they have only just begun to make progress. If anything, this is teaching them that it's fine to bludgeon someone to death as long as we can fix you afterwards. There really is no punishment there, and if they were so afraid of their identities being exposed, then they shouldn't have committed the murder. They were teenagers after all, and certainly knew right from wrong, no matter how much their lawyers tried to make out that they were children who weren't really responsible for their own actions. 2 years after Angela Wrightson's murder, members of her family went public to express their desire for the passing of Angie's Law, a piece of legislation designed to give the British police and social workers more power to intervene when there is evidence that a vulnerable person is being exploited. Angela Wrightson had preferred prison to being on the out, according to Donna Jenkins, who met her in jail. She stated, "Angie was a lost soul who found life easier inside. She'd become largely institutionalised. Her position as a laundrywoman was the first time she had felt valued. This prison job had given her a sense of purpose in life." Angela's mother, who she had not been in contact with since being a child, came out from the shadows after her murder. The judge spoke of an emotional letter he had received from Angela's mother that described her horror at seeing her daughter's battered body in the mortuary. The judge said, "She does not think that she will ever be able to blink away those images. She cannot understand how you could have been as violent as you were. She is not alone in that view. She has been disgusted by the laughing and giggling and sharing of photographs during the time of and immediately after the attack. She also found it so difficult to listen to the details of the evidence that she had to stop coming to court." It emerged that the pair had absconded from care homes 18 times in the 30 nights before they battered Angela to death. In mitigation, Jamie Hill, defending the older girl, said that the violence inflicted against Angela was born out of childhood stupidity, and the girls were clearly out of their control. He argued that the girl was suffering from a mental disorder and had not in fact intended to kill Angela Wrightson. The British media tried to get requests granted to publish the identity of the 13 and 14-year-old girls, but this was denied. In rejecting the application, the judge revealed that the older girl had tried to kill herself a total of 4 times during the course of the trial. He said that some of these attempts had happened on court premises during the trial, and one of the court officials had saved the girl's life when she had tried to strangle herself with her own hair in the toilets. The judge told the older girl, "I've seen you harming yourself. You scratch away at your features, you bang your head against walls, you do everything you can to harm yourself. Those looking after you are on high alert to look after your safety. I'm prepared to take notice of your current state of health as a mitigating feature. It is also highly influential in my decision for you to remain anonymous." Both girls denied murder and failed to show any remorse during the Leeds Crown Court trial, at which they tried to blame each other. The older of the two admitted manslaughter, whilst the other said she did not encourage nor take part in the violence. Both girls sobbed uncontrollably as they were convicted of murder, but showed little emotion during the sentencing. The judge told the girls that they would have been facing much longer sentences if they were adults. The judge said that the starting point for his consideration of their minimum sentences was 12 years due to their age, but he said he had increased this due to aggravating factors in the case. They were eventually sentenced to minimum terms of 15 years imprisonment. Angela Wrightson's family said that the trial would haunt them for the rest of their lives, as they were told that she pleaded for her life before being murdered. Their statement said, "It's true that Angela, or Angie as she was known to us all, led a troubled life, and at times chaotic lifestyle. And as a family we were not as close as we ought to have been, but the chance to put that right has now been taken away from us."